Hey, Holy Girls, welcome back to Holy Girl Talk. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back and spending this time with me again, truly. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm really glad you found your way to this space. Holy Girl Talk is a place where we talk about God, scripture, love, healing, dating, emotions, and real life in a way that's honest, grounded, and compassionate. You don't have to have it all figured out to be here. You don't have to be calm, confident, or clear yet. You're welcome exactly as you are. Before we get into today's episode, I want to gently say this. If you know a woman who is exhausted from overthinking her relationships, replaying conversations in her head, questioning every silence, or wondering if she's hearing God or just her own anxiety, please share this episode with her. Send it to the friend who keeps saying, I don't know if this is discernment or if I'm just spiraling. This conversation is meant to bring peace, not pressure. Today, we're talking about discernment versus overthinking in love. And I want to start by normalizing something. If you care deeply, you probably think deeply. Loving someone, opening your heart, or even considering a relationship brings up vulnerability. And vulnerability naturally activates your mind. So if you've ever felt like your thoughts run faster when your heart is involved, you're not broken. You're human. But there is a difference between wisdom and worry, between God's guidance and fear dressed up as intuition. And so many holy girls struggle right here because overthinking often feels responsible. It feels like you're being cautious, prayerful, discerning, but instead of producing clarity, it produces anxiety. Instead of peace, it produces mental exhaustion. This episode is for the women who are tired of analyzing every text, every pause, every shift in energy, the ones who are constantly asking, is this God warning me or am I just afraid? The ones who want to date with intention and faith, not constant stress. God cares deeply about your relationships, and He is not interested in guiding you through confusion, panic, or mental chaos. His guidance brings peace, even when the answer isn't what you hoped for. So today, we're going to gently unpack the difference between discernment and overthinking so you can move forward with clarity instead of fear. Take a breath. You're safe here. Let's talk about it. So, why does this feel so confusing in the first place? Because love is not neutral. When you care, you open yourself up, you invest emotionally, you imagine possibilities, and the moment your heart gets involved, your mind wants to protect you. It wants certainty, it wants control, it wants to prevent pain before it happens. That's where the confusion starts. Thinking deeply isn't the problem, caring isn't the problem. The problem is when deep thinking turns into spiraling, when your mind starts filling in gaps with fear, when you begin predicting outcomes instead of observing reality, when one unanswered text becomes 10 imagined scenarios, when silence feels like danger instead of just silence. And for many women, this is where discernment and overthinking get tangled because overthinking feels like wisdom. It sounds like I'm just being careful, I'm just paying attention, I'm just trying not to get hurt again. But the fruit tells a different story. Overthinking doesn't make you feel clearer, it makes you feel anxious. It doesn't anchor you, it keeps you restless. Another reason this is so confusing is because many of us were taught to ignore our intuition in the past. So now, when we finally start paying attention to our inner world, we don't know how to tell the difference between God's guidance and our own fear responses. Especially if we've been hurt before, especially if we've been blindsided, especially if we've been in relationships where confusion was normal. When your nervous system has learned to associate love with uncertainty, your mind stays on high alert. It scans for danger. It analyzes tone. It overinterprets changes. And all of that can feel spiritual, but it's often just your heart trying to stay safe. This is why discernment feels hard to access when emotions are loud. Discernment is quiet. It requires stillness. And stillness feels uncomfortable when you're used to bracing yourself for disappointment. So, if you've been thinking, why can't I tell the difference anymore? Why does everything feel so unclear? I want you to hear this gently. Confusion is not a character flaw, it's often a sign that your heart has been through something and is learning how to trust again. And that's exactly where God meets you. Overthinking is not you being dramatic, it's not you being weak, and it's definitely not you lacking faith. Overthinking is usually fear trying to protect you with the tools it has available. When your heart has experienced disappointment, betrayal, or uncertainty, your mind steps in and says, I'll make sure this never happens again. And the way it tries to do that is by anticipating every possible outcome, running scenarios, replaying conversations, dissecting tone, timing, and silence. It feels productive because it keeps you busy, but it doesn't actually keep you safe. It keeps you anxious. Overthinking often disguises itself as discernment because it asks spiritual sounding questions. Is this a red flag? Is God warning me? Am I ignoring something? But instead of leading you toward clarity, it pulls you into mental loops. It keeps you stuck in what if instead of grounded in what is. And here's the key difference: overthinking focuses on hypotheticals, on imagined futures, on catastrophes that haven't happened yet. Discernment, on the other hand, evaluates reality. It looks at patterns, behavior, consistency, and fruit. Overthinking reacts to feelings. Discernment responds to truth. Overthinking also creates urgency. It pushes you to decide quickly, pull away prematurely, or seek reassurance constantly. It feels restless, loud, draining, and the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to hear anything else. If this feels familiar, I want you to know your mind isn't betraying you, it's trying to protect a heart that learned pain through experience. But protection rooted in fear will never produce peace. Only truth can do that. Overthinking doesn't come out of nowhere, it grows out of experiences that taught your heart to stay alert. For many holy girls, it's rooted in past relationships that were confusing, inconsistent, or unsafe. Times when you trusted someone and were blindsided, when clarity was promised but never delivered, when words and actions didn't match. When your heart has lived through that, it learns to stay on guard. So now, instead of relaxing into connection, your mind starts scanning for danger. It looks for patterns too early. It anticipates abandonment. It assumes something bad is coming, not because it is, but because that's what happened before. This is why overthinking often feels strongest when you care the most, because love activates memory, it wakes up old wounds, and your mind says, I won't let this hurt me again, I'll figure it out before it gets bad. But here's the gentle truth: healing doesn't come from anticipating pain, it comes from learning to trust yourself, trust God, and stay grounded in the present. Overthinking tries to control the future because the past felt unpredictable. Discernment doesn't rush, it observes. Another root of overthinking is the desire for control. When outcomes feel uncertain, the mind tries to create certainty through analysis. But certainty doesn't come from thinking harder, it comes from surrender. And surrender is uncomfortable when you've learned that love costs something. So if you find yourself overanalyzing in relationships, I want you to know it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your heart has been protecting itself the best way it knows how, and God is gentle with that. Healing doesn't require you to silence your thoughts, it invites you to understand them. Discernment feels very different from overthinking, and once you experience the difference, it becomes easier to recognize. Discernment is not loud. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't spin you into mental chaos. Discernment is steady, calm, and grounded, even when the answer is no. When discernment is at work, you may still feel emotion, but you don't feel panic. You may still feel disappointment, but you don't feel confusion. There's a quiet knowing that settles in your spirit, a sense of clarity that doesn't need to argue with itself. Discernment focuses on patterns, not isolated moments. It looks at consistency over time. It evaluates character, integrity, and alignment with God's values. It doesn't obsess over one text, one conversation, or one off day. It zooms out and asks, what is this person showing me repeatedly? Another important difference is the fruit. Discernment brings peace, not necessarily comfort, but peace. Even when God is saying no, there is a sense of steadiness that accompanies it. Overthinking, on the other hand, drains you. It leaves you restless, second guessing, and mentally exhausted. Discernment also doesn't demand immediate action. It allows you to wait without spiraling. It trusts God to reveal what you need to know in time. It doesn't pressure you to decide before clarity arrives. If you've been wondering why something feels off but not chaotic, that may be discernment. If something feels loud, urgent, and fear driven, that's often overthinking. And the more you learn to sit with peace, the easier it becomes to recognize God's guidance when it comes. One of the most important things to understand when it comes to discernment is how God actually speaks. Because many women assume that if God is warning them, it will feel intense, urgent, or alarming. But that's not usually how God communicates. God's voice is consistent with his character. It's calm, it's clear, it's coherent. When God gives a warning, it comes with direction, not panic. When God gives a green light, it comes with peace, not obsession. And when God asks you to wait, it doesn't feel like anxiety spiraling out of control. It feels like a gentle restraint. Fear, on the other hand, is loud. Fear rushes you. Fear demands certainty now. Fear says, decide quickly or you'll get hurt. Fear feels chaotic, scattered, and exhausting. God's guidance never leads you into mental turmoil. Even when the decision is hard, his presence steadies you. This is why prayer is so important in relationships. Not prayer that sounds like constant questioning, but prayer that creates stillness. Discernment grows in quiet spaces, not in mental noise. When you slow down enough to sit with God, patterns become clearer. Red flags don't need to be hunted, they reveal themselves naturally over time. Another sign it's God speaking is alignment. His guidance will never contradict his word or push you to compromise your values. God doesn't rush intimacy, he doesn't blur boundaries, he doesn't pressure you into confusion. His leading always protects your peace, your integrity, and your future. So if you're asking, is this God or is this my anxiety? Pay attention to the fruit. God's voice brings clarity and calm even when it's firm. Fear's voice brings restlessness and doubt even when it sounds spiritual. Learning to trust God's voice means learning to trust peace, not perfection, not certainty, but peace. One of the biggest differences between discernment and overthinking shows up in how you interpret information. Overthinking projects fear into the future. Discernment evaluates patterns in the present. Projection sounds like this: what if this turns into what I went through before? What if they change? What if I'm missing something? What if I get hurt again? Projection takes past pain and casts it forward, assuming history is about to repeat itself, even when there's no current evidence. Discernment sounds different. Discernment asks what is actually happening right now. What am I consistently seeing, not just occasionally feeling? Are this person's actions aligned with their words over time? Is there fruit, honesty, effort, respect, consistency? Overthinking zooms in on isolated moments. One late reply, one off tone, one awkward interaction. Discernment zooms out. It looks at trajectory. It watches how someone handles conflict, boundaries, responsibility, and accountability over time. This is why overthinking feels exhausting, because it's always reacting, always scanning, always trying to prevent pain before it exists. Discernment is observant, not reactive. It allows things to unfold without needing to micromanage every detail. And this is such a freeing shift. You don't need to decode everything. You don't need to read between every line. You don't need to guess intentions when behavior is consistent. Truth doesn't hide, it reveals itself through patterns. So if you find yourself constantly asking, what if, pause and come back to what is. What has this person shown you repeatedly? Not once, not when things were perfect, but over time. That's where discernment lives, not in fear based projections, but in steady, honest observation. Let's make this practical, because sometimes you don't need more theory, you need language for what you're experiencing. Overthinking feels urgent. It pushes you to figure everything out right now. It keeps your mind busy, looping, and tired. You feel the need to check, recheck, analyze, and seek reassurance. Even after you pray, the anxiety stays loud. Overthinking drains you. It steals your focus. It leaves you second guessing yourself and questioning God's nearness. Discernment feels patient. It doesn't rush you to conclusions. It allows you to wait without spiraling. You may not have every answer yet, but you're not panicking about it. There's a sense of steadiness, like I don't know everything, but I'm okay right here. Discernment strengthens you instead of depleting you. Overthinking tries to control outcomes. It asks, how do I prevent this from going wrong? How do I make sure I don't get hurt? Discernment surrenders outcomes. It asks, is this aligned with God's character and my values? And then it trusts God with what happens next. Overthinking magnifies fear. Discernment magnifies truth. Overthinking makes you hyper-focused on potential loss. Discernment keeps you grounded in peace, even when clarity is still forming. And here's an important one. Overthinking makes you feel like you have to do something to quiet your anxiety. Discernment makes you feel like you can be still and let clarity come. If you're exhausted, restless, and constantly mentally replaying, that's not discernment. If you're calm, observant, and steady, even without all the answers, that's where discernment usually lives. God's guidance will never require you to abandon peace to find truth. One of the clearest ways to tell the difference between discernment and overthinking is the volume. Fear is loud, it demands your attention, it interrupts your peace, it keeps talking even when nothing new has happened. Fear pushes you to interpret silence as danger and stillness as a problem. Discernment is quiet, it doesn't shout to be heard, it doesn't compete with your thoughts. It settles in gently and stays consistent. You might not feel excited, but you feel steady. You might not feel certain, but you feel calm. Discernment doesn't need to convince you, it simply makes sense. This is why so many women confuse fear with intuition. Fear feels intense, and intensity feels important. But intensity is not the same as truth. God's wisdom does not come with chaos attached to it. Even when God is redirecting you, there is a deep anchoring peace that accompanies his guidance. Learning to trust discernment means learning to sit with quiet, to resist the urge to decode every pause, to stop assuming that silence means something is wrong. Sometimes silence is just space. Space for clarity to form, space for God to work, space for you to rest. If you've been living in mental noise, I want you to know this. Peace is not something you have to earn by figuring everything out. Peace is something God gives when you stop fighting for control. Now, I want you to reflect gently for a moment. Where in your love life have you been overthinking instead of observing? What thoughts have been loud and urgent, and what has been quiet but steady? Are you reacting to fear from the past or responding to what's actually happening in the present? If this episode resonated with you, please share it. Send it to the friend who is mentally exhausted from dating, the one who keeps asking if she's discerning or just anxious, the woman who needs permission to rest her mind and trust God's guidance. One share could help someone finally exhale. Thank you, Holy Girls, for spending this time with me today. Thank you for showing up honestly, even when the work is internal and unseen. If you'd like to send in prayer requests, testimonies, or episode suggestions, you can email holygirltalkpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, make sure you're following Holy Girl Talk so you don't miss future episodes like this one. I'm praying that God gives you clarity without anxiety, wisdom without fear, and peace that guards your heart and mind. May you learn to recognize his voice by the calm it brings, and may you trust that he will guide you gently, faithfully, and on time. Until next time, Holy Girls, rest your mind, trust his peace. And one last thing before you go. If this episode brought you clarity or helped quiet your mind even a little, please share it. Send it to the woman who's tired of spiraling, tired of guessing, tired of questioning whether she's hearing God or her own fear. Your share might be the permission someone needs to rest and trust God again. Thank you for listening, Holy Girls. I'll see you in the next episode.